Good morning. Welcome to Northwest Unitarian Universalist Church, where we are gathering both virtually and in person as one connected community. I am Tom Ott, and my pronouns are he, him. I'll be your worship leader for this morning's service, and I'm joined by Reverend Julie Brock and Alex Myers. In a bit of a mystery, you notice this lovely bowl appeared this morning, and neither Reverend Julie nor Alex nor I have any idea where it came from. If you are a visitor online and would like Northwest to stay in touch with you, please fill out the visitor form appearing in the chat box. If you are with us in person, you can fill out the visitor sign-in form in the atrium. So now please greet your neighbors with a wave from wherever you are.
Folks, I asked Tom if I could do the announcements today because we have so many cool things going on and some of it has changed since yesterday. So I wanted to say thank you so much for being here today. You can find out more about the life of our congregation on our website or in the weekly newsletter. If you would like to be signed up for that newsletter, contact Martha. She's here. She's hanging out somewhere. But here are a few announcements that we do want to highlight. Y'all, the website and the back of the door now include the locations of where we are going to be. So if you want to know where worship is and we forgot the text message and you don't want to look through the newsletter, they are on the back of the door posted and on the Breeze calendar on our website. But here is isn't it nice to have an administrator? But here is the short version, so we don't have to do a whole quiz. Through the end of March, there are only going to be 2 times that we are not meeting. There's going to be no service here in the Northwest Sanctuary. One of them is going to be March 16th. Megan Douglas is going to be preaching at First Congregational in their chapel there. It's going to be a joint service. And the 23rd of March, we are all going to UU Farmington. Woohoo, Service Project Day. It's exciting. So, what are the 2 days we don't have to be here?
March 16th and 23rd.
You all are, no, did I say March 23rd? March 30th. It's on the door. Don't listen to me, listen to the door. All right, Northwest UU is going to have a congregational meeting after service today. This meeting is going to introduce proposed bylaw changes, but we will not be voting on those bylaw changes until the May community meeting. There are some significant changes, so we wanted to give people a chance to hear about them, to ask questions before we actually do a vote. So if you have questions and are interested in the bylaw changes, please stick around and come to informational sessions that are going to be happening through June. Our canvas is kicking off already, and the Canvas committee wants to have their thumb on the pulse of what's going on here, so they're asking you to fill out a survey. Barbara Wallace has surveys in person. There are surveys in your newsletter. Come tell us what you think, what you like, what's going on. And our next worship retreat is going to be this Saturday, February 1st at noon. Come eat, give ideas. If you have a reading or a story, do like or don't like something we're doing in worship. This is a communal worship building experience open to everyone. The February 1st, to bring a dish to share, you get lunch, camaraderie, and a lifted spirit. Not a bad afternoon. And if you want to get more engaged, but don't want to join a committee, we're having a program council here on February 9th after service. Program council is a time for all of the people that are running the programs to tell you what's going on in your programmatic life of your church, and to say things like, I don't need somebody to come to committee meetings, but I could use somebody to help out on this specific day. Or, I don't need somebody to come to committee meetings, but I sure could use someone to make calls from home once in a while to check on some of our members. If you are interested in becoming involved in the life of the church, but don't have hours and hours to spend at meetings, taking minutes and doing reports, this is a great way for you to come in and have time-bound, clearly packaged ways to help out your community. So really, really, really trying to get this off the ground. Please, everyone, if you can, come to Program Council on February 9th. You'll get fed lunch there too. So again, not a bad way to spend an afternoon. We are now going to move into the worship portion of the service. So if everyone will take a deep breath and settle into this time and space and be awed by our gorgeous, gorgeous music.
The flaming chalice is a symbol of our faith. We light it knowing this morning that many other Unitarian Universalist congregations across this land and around the world are doing the same. We light our chalice with words from Northwest UU's mission statement. So please repeat after me. We light this flame to grow in spirit, knowledge, and action.
We light this flame to grow in spirit, knowledge, and action.
Accept and challenge one another.
Accept and challenge one another.
To support each other in times of joy and need.
To support each other in times of joy and need.
Each week we offer a land acknowledgement. We honor and pay our respects to the land on which we live and work, which was violently stolen through colonialism and genocide, and the forced removal of its traditional stewards. These stewards were the Anishinaabe, the Council of Three Fires, which include the Ottawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi, also known as the Ottawa, Chippewa, and Potawatomi tribes. We also acknowledge the people of African descent who were forcibly removed from their land, and separated from their families through kidnapping and enslavement. We pay reverence and respect to them for building this country's infrastructure and economy with no compensation or reparations to date. If you will all join me in singing our opening hymn, number 368, Now Let Us Sing. There is a high part and a low part. You can choose which part you want, or if you don't know either, make up your own.
I will try my best to lead you on both parts, but no promises. Now let us sing to the power of the wind. Now let us sing. Lift up your voice, be not afraid. Now let us sing to the power of the faith within. Now let us sing to the power of the hope within. Let us sing the power of the hope within.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Eva.
I would like to invite all the children to come up front. And Brooklyn, can you bring your chair right here? Because you're going to do something for me this morning. So if you guys want to sit either up front or in the chairs, either way, you can sit, because we're going to need you for this story. Okay, so my question for you guys is, you can just put those books on the ground, that's fine. My question for you guys this morning is, do you know any women in history who were UU preachers? Have I taught you about any of that yet? I don't think so. So we're going to learn today about a woman named Maria Cook. Can you say that? Maria Cook. Okay, so Maria Cook is right here. She's demonstrated right here. So she's gonna act out some things, and you guys are gonna be the people that come and listen to her. You're gonna hear about what you're gonna do in a second. Okay, in 1779, more than 200 years ago, lived a woman named Maria Cook. And Maria Cook was a Universalist. This was before they merged the two Unitarian Universalist churches, which meant she believed God loved all people, everyone in the universe, no matter what. And since God loved everyone, person's voice mattered. When Maria grew up, she decided to speak out for what she believed. And she started talking to people. Can you start talking to people? These are the people here, right here. All these people, see them? Start talking to people. And she said to them, that God loved everyone. Can you say that? That's what she said, yeah. And everyone's voice mattered. Good. She talked to everyone about universalism, and she talked to the people in their houses. There's the people in the houses over there. She talked to people in the streets. There's the people in the streets over there. And she talked to people in the stores. And then she started talking to people in the church. And not just the church or before church, but during church. And she actually went up to the pulpit where preachers go. And you can pretend you're going up to the pulpit. And she started talking about universalism. Oh my gosh! Then people started talking about her. Okay, you guys, start talking about her. Pretend you're talking about her. Because back then, even though the Constitution promised all people would have the freedom of speech, it didn't really work that way. Women weren't supposed to talk in public. Women weren't allowed to vote, which is a very important way of speaking. Women were not allowed to give speeches, run for office, so none of them could vote either, and they certainly weren't supposed to be preachers. Some people said so in the Bible, that's what they said. Okay, but Maria preached anyway. So she spoke about what she believed in, and she traveled around from town to town. Can you travel from town to town? And preaching about universalism, and lots of people came to listen. You guys come listen to her speak. And she spoke as well, and many people started believing in universalism. And in 1811, a Universalist church gave Maria Cook a letter of fellowship. And today, we remember her as the first woman to be a Universalist preacher. Yeah, Maria. Not everyone liked having a woman preacher in town. You guys give her a boo. Boo. They didn't want her there. And in 1813, she was arrested. Uh-oh. Can you guys arrest her? The police said it was because she was a vagrant and didn't have a house to live in, even though she did. And when the police came, Maria didn't argue. She did resist. So, hold on. Come back. For that, so Maria refused to walk. So you guys actually have to carry her without walking. The police had to pick her up and carry her to the police wagon. And they drove the wagon to Cooperstown or something. And then they had to carry her from the wagon to the judge. Who's the judge? You want to be the judge? Okay, Addison. Carry her to the judge. Okay, this is going to be interesting. She spoke out and told that judge, she told them that she didn't recognize his authority. Okay. Can you say that? I don't recognize your authority. She did not think she had the right to be, she did not think he had a right to be a judge for her, and she refused to answer his questions. Can you say that? I refuse to answer your question. For that, the judge sentenced her to jail. But Maria wouldn't walk there either. You have to pick her up. And the police had to pick her up and carry her to jail. And once she was there, guess what she started to do? She started to preach to the people there. She talked to the people in jail. She talked to the police. She talked to the prisoners. She talked to everyone she met about Universalism. And she just went on preaching, and she had quite a few prison converts. And by the way, Julie adapted the story. I'm sure she wrote that. Maybe not. After a few weeks of that, the judge let her go. And Maria continued traveling different towns and preaching about Universalism. And all her life, Maria Cook spoke out for what she believed in and what she thought was right. And the Universalist religion Maria Cook talked about is part of our own heritage and the part of the name Unitarian Universalism. Like Maria Cook, she believed every person should stand up and speak out for what is right and true. And many of us say it differently, but we believe that God loves us and that our voices matter. Some people believe in God, some people don't. But along the same lines that we all matter. So, what'd you like about the story, you guys? Yes, Brooklyn.
I like when I went to jail.
Anybody else? Come here, Mina. Did you? Rachel?
I like when we had to carry her.
Oh, yeah. The resistance part of the story.
I like taking her to jail.
You liked, okay. All right. I was just wondering, did you think it was an unfair thing was there an unfair thing that happened in this story? Yes? What do you think?
That I went to jail for something that I wanted to do.
Yes, we're talking about something important, right? Yeah. Anything else? Do you think just being a woman preacher, you should have to go to jail for that? No. An unfair judge, yeah. Okay, what do you think was brave? Last question. Yes.
That was yapping too much.
Well, I think maybe this is in the story, but does anybody else think that it was brave for her to get up and talk? Yeah, and speak out? Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. We're going to do Carry the Flame now. Yes, Brooklyn, do you have one thing before we go? Go ahead.
Can I carry the challenge?
I think Yona's going to carry it today. Sorry. Next time, maybe. Okay. So if you would rise, and if you're able and can rise, we're going to sing the children out, and they're going to carry the chalice to their classes.
To new learning, may your lips bring May your heart know love and your hands do the work of justice as you go your way in peace. As you go your way in peace.
This month, Northwest Community Partner is Southfield Emergency Needs Fund. Their goal is to help residents overcome personal hurdles to achieve a satisfying and productive quality of life. Human Services is a division of Southfield Community Relations. All undesignated donations will be split between Southfield Emergency Needs Fund and our congregation. You can give in a variety of ways that are now visible on your screen. And for those here in person, we will pass the collection basket for checks and cash. There's also a QR code on your order of service. We honor your generosity, ensuring that our collective resources do a greater good for ourselves and our world than any of us would have done individually.
Hello, I'm Dave Young. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm a member of Northwest Pastoral Care Committee. I want to remind you that anyone needing the support of our community can reach out to Reverend Julie Brock or Pastor Eli Krantz, or by emailing the Pastoral Care Team at pastoralcare@northwesternuu.org. The collective cares of our community are recorded in our Book of Joys and Sorrows, which will remain on the red cabinet near the name tags. If you would like to submit a joy or sorrow virtually, please email pastoralcare@northwestuu.org. For those that gave a joy or sorrow, when I announce your name, please raise your hand. First, from Susan Hanson. There. Her daughter, Andrea, was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic carcinoma. So thoughts go to her, light a candle, great. Liz Buckner, she get in? I think she's still out in the lobby. But Liz is having her right shoulder replaced on Tuesday. Big operation. Sorrow from Jan Berger Cohn. Back there. Okay. Her dear sister-in-law, Colleen, is on hospice. Please keep her and my brother Dwayne and all the family in your thoughts. For these and the joys and sorrows that are held in the sanctuary of our hearts, I offer this prayer. Sources of radiance and resilience, keep watch with those who work or watch or weep this night. May the suffering be soothed. May the sick be tended. May the weary find rest. May the dying and those who love them find peace. May the joyous be shielded. And may all know that we are surrounded in a love that is with us always, a web that connects us to all that exists. May we take a few moments of silence to be with each other in this sacred space. We will come out singing.
They've come unto me, sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Our reading today is They Are With Us Still by Kathleen McTeague. In the struggles we choose for ourselves, in the ways we move forward in our lives and bring our world forward with us, it is right to remember the names of those who gave us strength in this choice of living. It is right to name the power of hard lives well lived. We share a history with those lives. We belong to the same motion. They too were strengthened by what had gone before. They too were drawn on by the vision of what might come to be. Those who lived before us, who struggled for justice and suffered injustice before us, have not melted into the dust and have not disappeared. They are with us still. The lives they lived hold us steady. Their words remind us and call us back to ourselves. Their courage and love evoke our own. We, the living, carry them with us. We are their voices, their hands, and their hearts. We take them with us, and with them choose the deeper path of living. You are now invited to rise in body or spirit and join in singing hymn number 107, Now Sing We of the Brave of Old.
I'll play the melody through once. This is a little unfamiliar for us. Now sing we of the brave of old. not sell themselves for gold, yet left us riches manifold. Alleluia! Of those who fought a goodly fight, for liberty, for truth and right, their patient pain delivereth might. Alleluia! Who when no gleam did point the way, pressed ever on by night, by day, and spite of pain did ever say, Alleluia! Who long the world so sorrows bore, and toiled and loved and suffered sore, and being dead live evermore. Alleluia! Maybe.
Is it true Unitarian Universalists used to be Puritans? And I was like, oh yeah. He was like, I would love to hear that story. And the theme of the month is story, so we are going to tell the story about how Puritans became Unitarian Universalists, about how we, the people that used to hold witch trials in our sanctuaries, now hold Wiccan rituals in our sanctuary. Thank you, Michael. Start again? We are telling the story of how Puritans became Unitarian Universalists, how we went from holding witch trials to Wiccan ceremonies in our sanctuary. But there's a couple of things I want to preamble before we do this. One of them is, anytime you talk about the colonial United States, you are talking about something that is happening against a backdrop of slavery and genocide and horrific things happening. If I wanted to tell you this entire story, I would have to do it with like 3 hours and a whiteboard. So I don't have time to get into all of the nuances, but I feel like I should hold that up before we start to preach that this is our history too. The second thing I want to say is that when I say we, your mileage may vary, right? I know that I grew up a Unitarian Universalist, but also in the backdrop of a very Irish Catholic family. So not all of us came over on the Mayflower, and not all of us trace our people back to the Mayflower, but all of us are here building this thing now. And I am not talking about any of our individual histories. I am talking about our collective history, how Unitarian Universalism got to be here. And you are part of Unitarian Universalism, even if it is your first time here in a UU sanctuary, because we're all part of an interdependent web that hooks up with each other and builds something bigger for the future. So, welcome. And the third thing I want to do is just establish really quickly that we actually did come from Puritans. Because a lot of times when I tell this story, when people hear that UUs came from Puritans, they say, oh yeah, all Congregationalist churches, the Baptists, the people that are still called Congregationalists, like when we hang out in Detroit, we're now hanging out at the Congregationalist church there. The UCC churches, all of them came from this like Puritan congregational polity thing. And sure, that is true. But Unitarian Universalism in specific has directly inherited the legacy of Puritanism. You want me to prove it to you? All right. So So basically, there were two types of English colonialists. They're the ones looking for economic opportunity, the Roanoke and Jamestown people. And then they're the ones looking for religious freedom. They were the Mayflower folks, the ones that came over in 1620. And the first thing they did was build a church in Plymouth. In 1620, that church is still operating today. It has through the ages continued to meet almost every Sunday morning for 400 years, and it is still called the First Church Plymouth, only now it is also called the First Church Plymouth Unitarian Universalist. And now you might be thinking, or a colonial historian might be thinking, okay, but there's a difference between a pilgrim and a Puritan. The Pilgrims wanted to completely separate from the Church of England. The Puritans just wanted to reform it to make it pure. So there were a group of people, even in that Mayflower bunch, who thought, you know what, we can use the same Book of Common Prayer. We don't have to reform everything. We are going to become Puritans and move ourselves over to Salem, start a new church in 1629, establish the First Church of Salem. And those were the real Puritans. And that is true, and that church is still operating today. It is now called the First Church of Salem Unitarian Universalist. Okay, but if we're like thinking Puritan, it's not just about like the church, right? It's the culture. It's that Puritan culture. It's the way they set up their society. And those folks didn't come over on the Mayflower. They came over in 1630 on a ship called the Antebellum. And the Antebellum was carrying like the first governor of Massachusetts, right? It had all the hoity-toity people who established the First Church of Boston. And the First Church of Boston was the church that all of the Congregationalist churches followed. It was the one that was the flagship Congregationalist church in the center of society, and it is still there today. I once applied for a job there. It's called the First Church Boston Unitarian Universalist. So, how did that happen? Right? How are we the inheritors of these Puritan churches? Well, okay. So in order to do this, I'm going to say there are about 3 ways that Puritan means Puritan. There are 3 main things that a Puritan society had. One of them we absolutely reformed. One of them we have inherited, and one of them we convoluted. And I think it'd be kind of fun to play a game. I'm going to tell you one of the things, and you tell me, did we reform, inherit, or convolute it? Okay, so the first thing, congregational polity. These folks were moving over to, they went across an ocean and colonized a land so that they could have a non-hierarchical church structure and really governance structure where it was local rule and the people were the highest level of authority, not some papal denomination, not the Pope, not some denomination. It was the people, congregational polity. Reformed, inherited, or convoluted? Sort of. Amen, Julia. Yeah, congregational polity is still a thing that we do, but the way our ancestors imagined it, we would all be hanging out with each other and not really in our own separate little spaces, that we would get to know our neighbors. And over the years, we've kind of still done this, right? We still have congregational polity. The UUA can't tell us what to do. But we haven't gotten to know our neighbors all that well. When we decided that we were going to be Congregationalist churches, it was really going to be about the people. So if one group was struggling, the other group was going to come over and help. Now, I would say that these churches in particular, my friend Julia's here this morning, she's a member of BUC, but she's doing OWL here this morning. And last week, we in Farmington, we were all at UU Detroit. So I would actually say we are moving back to what congregational polity was supposed to be. And I have preached about this, and David Pyle has preached about this, and no one signed up for 3 hours on a whiteboard. So that's all I'm going to say about congregational polity this morning. We have convoluted it, but I think we in these churches are starting to bring it back to its original intention. Good for us. So then the other one, culture. The Puritan culture, the culture that prized education and hard work and stoicism and asceticism and decorum. Do you think that we inherited that or reformed it? Oh, there's some mixed stuff there, huh? I would guess that whether you said inherited or reformed would closely align with how much you fit in that particular culture. So I will say we absolutely inherited it, and I'll prove it to you later, but first I want to talk about the thing I think we did the best, which was the thing that we reformed, which was the theology. The thing that we reformed from the Puritan days was the theology. The Puritans believed in a Calvinist theology, which means they believed in predestination, which means they believed that God had decided who was damned already, and there was nothing you could do about it, and you did not come to church to figure out how to save your soul, but to get clues about whether your soul had already been saved. This is the thing that we reformed. Good for us. But here's the thing. It is good for us that we reformed Puritan theology, but Puritan theology was never going to make it because it is really not a heritable trait. There are 3 things that you had to prove if you wanted to be seen as a full member of the church and an elite, elect, saved amongst Puritan society. These were the 3 things. You had to have a confession of faith, which means you had to get up and say whatever the latest doctrine or dogma was and say, I believe in this. Okay. You had to be a visible saint, which meant that in your dress and decorum and the way you interacted with society, you had to be the most upstanding. You couldn't have issues or problems in life because that was probably a hint, right? That like God had abandoned you. And so we had to keep all of our issues and problems we might have to ourselves, dress in the perfect way, hold ourselves to decorum. Women weren't supposed to speak. You heard about that. You had to be a visible saint. But here's the third thing, because those things, they can be faked. You can fake your behavior. You can say you believe in whatever. But the third thing you had to have was a conversion experience. You had to have God come and tap you on the shoulder and say, you, my friend, you are the elect. You are the elite. And the churches, First Church Boston, always leading the way. In 1636, they were like, how do we know if these conversion experiences are real? I think what we ought to do is have people get in front of the congregation and tell about their conversion experience, and then the congregation can vote on if it's legit or not. Can you imagine like the state of your eternal soul resting on like your moth story performance? My goodness. So here's what happened. These people that traveled an ocean and colonized a nation in order to be able to practice the religion they wanted, their kids, because they were all full members of the church, their kids got baptized. And almost always they did their confessions of faith, and most of them were visible saints, good upstanding citizens. But you didn't have that much penalty if you were baptized in the church for not having a conversion experience. You couldn't vote, you couldn't take communion, you couldn't get the good pews up front, but you could still interact with the church, which in that day meant interacting with society. You were still taken as a good, upstanding citizen. But if you gave a false report of conversion and were voted out, you were an outcast in society. So more and more people were like, I'm just, still waiting on my conversion experience, because their parents were really, really invested in having this full membership, this elect, this elite. And anyone who has a child in here knows your kids are not always the same amount of invested in the things that you think are important. But then something else started happening. Those kids started having kids. And because they were not full members in the church, if they had not had their conversion experience, they could not baptize their kids. So these grandmas and grandpas who came across an ocean and colonized a land to set up a church, they were starting to be told that their little grandbabies could not be baptized into that church. That did not go over well. It didn't go over well. There were starting to be all kinds of fights. Parents were really pushing their kids to go ahead and hurry up with their conversion experience. Come on. And so people came up with a compromise. There was a compromise called the halfway covenant. Now, just as an aside, if you are ever writing historical documents, history has not looked kind on putting fractions on people's humanity. But they did it anyway. It was called the halfway covenant, and it meant you could like halfway be a member. If your parents were full members and you were baptized into the church, you could then baptize your kids and let them wait for their own conversion experience. But this was scandalous too. People started to fight about whether this was okay. There was this guy, Charles Chauncey, who was getting in every pulpit he could find and say, I did not go across an ocean and colonize a land so I could sit with some unelect people. We are diluting the church population with these unelect. We may not have halfway covenants and members. And then there was this other guy, Tom Stoddard, and he was like, I mean, it's probably fine, right? I mean, like, so what if, just saying, just might be a bad idea, but just saying, what if not only did we let people get baptized, what if, even if they hadn't had their full conversion experience, what if we let them have communion with us and sit amongst us in the pews? What if the way to the society that we dreamed about was to let more people in? Shockingly, while Chauncey was going on about the devilry of hoop skirts, there was literally an entire sermon series that I ran across while researching this sermon on hoop skirts and how they made the skirt too far away from the skin to be decent. So he's yelling about hoop skirts and how everyone's going to hell. And Stoddard is saying, you want some communion? Maybe we should take care of our neighbors. Whose church do you think grew? And so I don't know if Puritanism was really something we reformed or it was just kind of survival of the fittest theology there, right? Because what happened then was if you're having all kinds of people who are not elect in your congregation, you can't really preach about it all the time, right? You can't really preach about Calvinist theology and how the non-elect are going to hell if most of the people sitting in your congregation are non-elect. And once they got used to stop preaching about how everyone's going to hell, once they stopped preaching about how to tell if your soul was saved, they started preaching about how you could save your soul. What can we do? What can we do proactively to have agency over our own lives and eternal destination? And then, there were all these farmers hanging out, right, in these villages, and they were like, oh, man, I don't know what those people in their white Puritan pulpits are saying, but I feel a benevolent God in the sunrise that falls over the harvest. And I think God is love and maybe everybody's saved. And so this idea that salvation could not only be earned, but was inherent, creeped into some of the theology. But here is where we have to talk about the second thing and how we inherited our culture. Because the only way that universal theology, that idea that all of universalism could be, that all souls were universally saved, got into those Boston elite pulpits was when someone intellectualized it and wrote it down. So here's the thing, a lot of the more progressive ministers in Boston at the time were preaching a small u universalist theology, right? They were basically saying, yeah, probably everybody's saved, but universalism had all kinds of flavors back then. Some people were like, yeah, everybody's saved, but like how good you are means whether or not you get into the good heaven. And some of them were like, yeah, I mean, everybody's saved, but you have to like spend some time in like purgatory or hell or something. We have to make up for our sins somehow, right? And then this guy, Hosea Ballou, comes along, and he's like, y'all, that does not make sense. Like literally, logically, you cannot have a theology of damnation and a theology of a benevolent, all-powerful God. Like those two can't go together, right? Like you cannot say God created us flawed and is going to punish us for those flaws and say God is a loving parent figure. We would call that bad parenting, right? Doesn't make sense. So he wrote something called the Treatise on Atonement in 1805 that was this very intellectual, scripturally based treatise. And suddenly, the elite preachers in the pulpits were like, oh, I've seen you at soirees, Ballou. I go into the same social circles as you. You know the right poets to quote. You know the right social functions to be at. You're not just feeling your religion. You explained it logically. Now we can really embrace universalism. There has always been a tenet of that Ivy League, New England, upper crust, well-educated, inherent in Unitarian Universalism. You want me to prove it to you again? Thanks, Alex. I appreciate it. The first thing those Puritans did when they came over in 1620 and 1629 and 1630 was they established a church. The second thing they did was establish a school. They wanted to make sure that the Congregationalist ministers were well educated. So in 1636, they established a school specifically set up to educate Congregationalist ministers. It's still going. Maybe you've heard of it. It's called Harvard. They did the same thing in the other stronghold of Congregationalism in Connecticut, established a school, still going today. Maybe you've heard of it. Bob? Bob, do you know? I'm a Yale graduate. Oh, see, Bob's proof, living proof. Bob is a Yale graduate. It's called Yale. You're a Columbia. I haven't traced that back to Unitarian roots, Bob. So give me next sermon, okay? All right. So y'all are starting to get used to yelling out. Like, I like it. You're going to be matching Detroit soon. So we have had this inherited idea of education is prized and important, which is true. There are some things about our inheritance of our culture that I really love. I love the idea that education is important and should be open to everyone, if it's actually open to everyone. But there's something that sometimes comes with that too. Our theology and our culture somewhere diverged. Do you remember that guy Stoddard who was like, maybe we could do the halfway thing. It's not that great of an idea, but it's better than nothing. He had a grandson named John Edwards. Have you all heard of John Edwards? Okay, so there was this thing that happened. The thing I wanted to say before I talked about John Edwards, sorry about that. The thing I wanted to say was there was a moment in culture in the United States where Unitarians specifically chose to be the culture that we are now. Not just that we inherited it, it was a choice. It was called the Great Awakening. And there was a thing that happened in the Great Awakening in the 1730s and 40s where people started moving outside of traditional church culture and started having tent revivals. Tent revivals. All kinds of spirited people were coming up and grabbing the microphone. Some people that did not have fancy degrees and did not go to those schools started preaching. That was scandalous. Some of them even got up and did entire sermons without reading from a piece of paper. That's right. And there was this experiential movement toward experiential movement toward church, like experiencing church. And then there were other people. These people were called the old lights. Whenever you're called the old lights, and there's like the new lights, maybe you have to think about where you are on the spectrum of decision making. But these people were very suspect and suspicious that church could be real and done in such a frivolous manner. They warned all the time about the enthusiasm of the church members, that there were actual sermons preached against religious enthusiasm. Can you imagine people getting upset about people being enthusiastic about church? And in fact, one person even did an entire treatise about anyone who could get up and preach an entire sermon without looking at a piece of paper was absolutely worshiping the devil. That's right, that's right. Who do you think our people were? Our people were not the devil worshipers. They were the ones accusing others of worshiping the devil. That guy Stoddard, who was like theologically liberal, well, what happened is people started coming in and there were more people hanging out, and his grandson, Edwards, was the first like real fire and brimstone preacher. He preached the sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. And those folks, while they were culturally liberal and allowed people to express themselves and allowed all kinds of people, women and folks of color, to have the microphone, there probably weren't microphones back then, they also had a very conservative theology. Whereas our folks, remember Charles Chauncey I told you about? Charles Chauncey? He had a great-grandson, also named Charles Chauncey. He was the guy who said that I'm a devil worshiper. He was sitting there saying that all of these people speaking out of turn, all of this religious enthusiasm, it made it so that our churches were disorderly. And he had very few people coming to his church. So they sat around and they read their Bible, and they said, you know what though? I don't think their theology is right. I don't actually think there's like a biblical base for the Trinity in this Bible. I think that maybe Jesus was actually less of a savior and more of a person that did this upstanding right behavior, and we're going to use Jesus as a paradigm of behavior rather than salvation. Let's just say we'll get rid of the Trinity altogether. Let's have more of a Unitarian theology. So we have these people who were culturally liberal, theologically conservative, and these other people that were culturally conservative and theologically liberal. And the reason that those churches in Boston and Salem and Plymouth say Unitarian Universalism is because we could fit in. The reason that Universalism came about was because Baloo was an upper crusty. I can hang out in the swanky places and talk the swanky talk. And the reason that those churches in Plymouth and Boston and Salem are Unitarian Universalist instead of Congregationalist is because we took over Harvard. I'm not kidding. So there was this big fight, right, between the Congregationalist churches and the Unitarian churches, and whoever got to control the Harvard curriculum was going to control the churches because all the ministers went to Harvard. And so there's this guy Hollis, and he invested in a chairship for the dean of the School of Divinity. And Hollis said, I want someone who is going to present a bevy of different ideas. And at the time, there was this minister named Henry Ware. And Henry Ware, he had a really good social media presence. He did. He was always writing pamphlets, and he was always in town squares, and he was talking to people about religion on a way that really met the common person, right? But he did this thing where he wouldn't be real explicit about his theology because he knew he was up for this deanship. And he set some curriculum out, and they looked at it, and I'm like, yeah, the curriculum covers all kinds of things. It covers Calvinism, covers predestination. Good, we're gonna elect you. Yeah, he talked about Calvinism and how it was kind of dying and useless. And yeah, he talked about the Trinity and how it was not biblically based. And so he was able to take over this chairship, this guy Henry Ware. We still have a Ware lecture at GA every year that has some fancy person come in and talk to all the people about all the things going on, someone who's a good communicator. But after Ware got elected, there was a pamphlet war. This is another deep dive I took this week researching this sermon, where everybody was like, we were taken in. He looked so presentable. He was clearly one of us. He went to the right clubs. He said the right things. How could he be one of the non-elect and not elite? Y'all, there was a moment in our history when we had to decide whether we were going to reform our theology in order to remain relevant and alive, and we decided we could let go of Puritanism. And I'm going to say something that's going to be hard right now. We are at a moment in our history when we need to decide whether we can let go of Puritan culture in order to survive. I'm not calling anyone out because I've said this in every UU church I've been a part of. I've said it in Detroit. I said it in Madison, Wisconsin. I've said it in Kentucky. Every UU church I have been a part of still has an elitist look on the world. Every UU church I've been a part of has deep issues with classism. Every UU church that I've been a part of loves it when people that are diverse come in, if they look diverse, so long as they don't behave in a diverse manner. I've been to 2 UU churches who started to have an active shooter policy after a working class family joined. I have been in UU churches that say things like, well, if they're gonna get their water shut off, why don't they just pay their water bills? Come on. There's still this like highly educated, we need to do our work in order to deserve our salvation. The poor kind of deserve it. Undercurrent in many of our congregations. And there's a way that our culture is directly affected. Every UU church I have been a part of has had a big fight about whether or not we could clap in service. Every UU church that I have been a part of has had a big fight about how much the kids should be involved in the service. Every UU church that I have been a part of has had a big fight about ritual in service. And here's what I will tell you. We are at a moment in which we cannot have the elite run the churches anymore. The next generation, they're not giving $10,000 a year in their pledges. They can't. And if we do not want to go quietly into the night, which is an okay choice, we're going to have to grapple with the parts of our culture that make us uncomfortable, but are inherited from a place that was exclusionary. Culturally, we should absolutely be excited about noisy kids in church and people that come from cultures that are emotionally exuberant, because it means that we are growing and reaching people who are not just us. We come from Puritanism. In some ways, we were brave enough to reform it and to say everyone deserves a voice. We say that theologically pretty strongly. We say that in our polity pretty strongly. I'm a fan, I'm in favor. We're going to have to learn to say it in our culture too. And that's going to be really hard. And it's going to make us uncomfortable. We've started. I'm proud of us for being where we are. And I look forward to going the next step with you all. Blessed be, and amen. If you want another example of the culture that we cling to, please stand and sing number 105, From Age to Age.
I'll again play the melody through once. From age to age, how grandly rise the prophet souls in line. Above the passing centuries, like beacon lights they shine. Like beacon lights they shine. They witness to one heritage, one spirit's quickening breath. Unwinding rain from age to age of freedom and of faith, of freedom and of faith. Their giving power our souls confess, though dead they speak to grace. Away the cloud of witnesses encompassing our way, encompassing our way. Through every race, in every clime, the song shall yet be heard. Move onward in thy course sublime, O everlasting word, O everlasting word.
Okay, yes. Well, I say we now extinguish our chalice. It sort of did it itself, but we do have the candles that came from there. So please repeat after me. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of hope.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of hope.
The warmth of community,
The warmth of community,
or the fire of commitment.
or the fire of commitment.
These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
These we carry in our hearts till we are together again.
You know, I wasn't going to do this, Bob, but now I am. Now, every time I have spoken with Bob Holly, almost, anytime it was a deep conversation, I've learned something. I'm really glad of his intelligence and his education. I'm really glad when I get to learn from him. What would it be like if we could prize that education? What would it be like if we could be a place where you could prize education and cultural inclusion? What would it be like if you could be loud and weird and also buttoned up if that's your thing? What if we took parts of the service to be exuberant and parts of the service to be solemn? What if we had services that were solemn and services that were chock full of kids running around having exuberant joy? What if we could be a place that started to do both and all of those things? There's a lot of churches that are plenty exuberant that don't prize education, and we see where that goes. But we also can't be a place where you can come unless you're a redneck. We can't be a place where you can come unless your kids have special needs. We can't be a place where you can come unless you're disabled and are going to yell out during service. We need to be a place that is open and inclusive to all forms of non-harmful behavior and expression of faith, and a place where people can learn and grow in spirit and action and community like your mission statement says. You think we can do it? I think we can. Let's go for it. Go in peace, return in love, get some coffee, come back for the congregational meeting. Get some potluck, come back for the congregational meeting.